Victor Jameson had precisely $27 in his checking account, a 6-year-old asleep in the backseat, and one broken taillight when he slammed open the door of the diner and saw a man grab a woman by the wrist. "Let go of her," Victor said, voice low and sharp. The guy, a wiry man in a suit too expensive for his manners, turned, laughing like he'd just been asked to share his fries. "Beat it, this isn't your business." Victor stepped forward. "You're making it mine." The woman's eyes locked on Victor's. They were wide, glassy with fear, her lips trembling just enough to break something in him. Her heels were kicked off under the table, her purse lay on the floor. She didn't say a word, but she didn't have to. Victor closed the distance. The guy shoved the woman behind him and swung. Victor ducked and landed one solid punch to the guy's jaw. He crumbled, groaning on the floor. The diner went silent. "Are you okay?" Victor turned to her, breathing hard. She nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "I think so." "Come on," Victor said, grabbing her shoes and purse and holding the door open. "Let's get you out of here." They stepped out into the night. A light drizzle had started, and his beat-up truck sat under the flickering streetlight. From the backseat, a little voice called out, groggy and sweet. "Daddy?" Victor's jaw tightened. "Yeah, buddy, just a sec." "I don't want to get you in trouble," the woman said, her voice soft and strangely calm now. "You're not." He glanced at her. "You need a ride," she hesitated. "Do you have a phone?" "No." "Can't afford to keep it on right now." He opened the passenger door for her. "Look, I've got a kid in the car. I'm not a psycho. You can sit up front, or I'll take you wherever you want to go and not say a word, but you shouldn't be alone tonight." She looked back at the diner. The guy inside wasn't moving. She looked at Victor again and nodded. "I'll ride with you, just for a bit." They drove in silence, except for little Emmett humming in the backseat. Victor kept glancing over. She was hugging her arms, still barefoot, still shaken. "You got a name, Juliette," she said after a long pause. "Juliette Rhodes." Victor nodded. "I'm Victor, that's my son Emmett." She turned around and smiled gently. "Hi, Emmett." "Hi," Emmett chirped, yawning. "You're pretty." Juliette laughed quietly, the first sound of warmth Victor had heard from her. He dropped her off at a hotel downtown. She handed him a $100 bill as she stepped out. "No," he said instantly. "I didn't do this for money." "I know." She pressed it into the glove box. "Then keep it for gas, for Emmett." Before he could argue, she was gone. Victor didn't expect to see her again. He didn't expect her to show up 3 days later at the auto shop where he worked, in a sleek black car with tinted windows and a driver who looked like he came from a spy movie. Juliette stepped out wearing sunglasses, heels, and a tailored coat that probably cost more than Victor made in a month. Every guy in the shop paused. Victor wiped his greasy hands on a rag and walked out. Hey, I wanted to thank you properly," Juliette said, taking off her sunglasses. "And I need help with something." "You've got a driver. Pretty sure you don't need me." She smiled, and it was different now, confident, composed, but her eyes still lingered on his face like she wasn't sure how to stop looking. "I need a mechanic I can trust." "Do you do home calls?" He stared at her. "You want me to come to your house?" She nodded. "It's complicated. You said you didn't have a phone, so I figured I'd show up." Victor ran a hand through his hair. "You're serious?" "I'm not used to people helping me without expecting something." She looked down. "You did. I want to return the favor." He didn't know what to say. The girl from the diner was gone. In her place stood someone powerful, elegant, rich. But there was something in her voice, behind the polish, that still sounded like the woman who'd looked at him like he was the only safe thing in the world. "I get off at 5, Victor said finally. "I'll follow your driver." She smiled again. Good. Her house was not a house. It was a mansion behind iron gates on a hill overlooking the city. Victor parked behind her car, feeling like he didn't belong the moment he stepped out of his truck. Juliette met him at the door, barefoot again now, in jeans and a soft sweater. "Thought I'd dress down," she said, seeing his expression. "This your place?" he asked. She nodded. "You live here alone?" She hesitated. "I do now." He followed her inside, through marble floors and high ceilings and a kitchen that looked like a magazine. She poured him coffee like it was normal. "This is insane," he muttered. "What is?" "This house." He shook his head. "You said thank you. You didn't have to do this." Juliette leaned against the counter. "I'm not doing this to say thank you. I just wanted to see you again." Victor froze. I haven't stopped thinking about you, she said softly. You were the only one who saw me that night, really saw me, he swallowed hard. Juliette. She moved closer. I know this is crazy, I know your life is complicated, but I like your son. I like you, and for once I want something that feels real. He looked at her, standing in this palace of a kitchen, barefoot and sincere, and he didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything. He kissed her, and she kissed him back like she'd been waiting her whole life for it. Victor left Juliette's mansion that night with his heart pounding and his hands still tingling from where they'd touched her. He didn't speak the whole drive home, not even when Emmett asked why he smelled like fancy soap and cinnamon. The next morning, Victor's boss caught him before he clocked in and handed him an envelope. This came for you, the man said, frowning. Hand-delivered. You got rich relatives I don't know about. Victor opened it. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a handwritten note on heavy cream paper, for the engine work, and for everything else. Call it a retainer, Jay. He stared at the check like it might catch fire in his hands. Don't just stand there like it's poison, his boss muttered. Go cash the thing, maybe you can finally fix that back tire. Victor folded the check and shoved it deep into his jacket pocket. He didn't tell anyone where it came from. Later that week, Juliette invited him and Emmett to a small art exhibit downtown. Victor nearly said no, but Emmett begged. And Juliette had already arranged for a babysitter. To meet them there someone from the gallery staff, with a quiet voice and gentle hands, who sat with Emmett in the children's room, while Victor followed Juliette through the main hall. You could have just emailed me tickets, he muttered as they walked beside a sculpture of glass and twisted steel. I don't do things halfway, she said, eyes on a painting. Besides, I wanted you to see something. Victor glanced around at the white walls and expensive lighting. I don't really get the appeal. Juliette stopped in front of a large canvas, stark brushstrokes full of motion and color. It looked like chaos and fire and longing all at once. This one is mine, she said quietly. He turned to her. You painted this. I used to show under a different name, she said. Before the company, before the board meetings and the family lawyers, I still do sometimes, but no one knows I'm behind it. Victor looked back at the painting. Suddenly, it made sense. It's angry, he said. She nodded. It was. When he turned to her again, she was watching him, not the painting. I wanted you to see this part of me, not the cars or the house, just this. He didn't say anything right away. His jaw flexed and he looked back at the canvas. I get it now, he said finally. Juliette exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath for days. After the exhibit, they took Emmett for gelato. They sat on a bench in the plaza, lights twinkling above them, Emmett climbing over Victor's lap with sticky hands and a chocolate-stained smile. Juliette laughed with him, helping him wipe his face, letting him tug at her scarf. She didn't flinch when the ice cream dripped on her coat. Her eyes shone with something Victor hadn't seen before, ease, like she wasn't pretending. Most people around me don't laugh, she said later, while Emmett chased pigeons nearby. They don't know how to be ridiculous, but you just let it happen. I don't have time to be polished, Victor said. Life doesn't give me the option. She looked at him then, serious. That's what I like about you. He didn't ask what she meant. He was afraid if he did, he'd ruin it. Over the next week, she kept finding reasons to see him. She asked about her car's brakes, then her generator, then a mysterious rattle that didn't exist. Each time she waited with coffee or lunch or both. She never made excuses. She never tried to hide that she just wanted him there. You know I can't afford to live in your world, he said once, wiping his hands on a towel in her garage. Whatever this is, it's not sustainable. Juliette leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. You think I care about sustainable? You should. You've got stockholders and private jets and people who expect you to marry someone with a trust fund. I've already done that, she said flatly. Victor paused. You were married, she nodded. What happened? He died, she said simply. 3 years ago, it wasn't a love match, it was arranged. Old money does that sometimes. He didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything. Juliette stepped closer. I don't want someone with perfect shoes and a private chef. I want someone who looks me in the eye and sees more than a last name or a bank account. Victor met her gaze. And you think that's me? I know it is. He let out a breath. I have a kid, I have debt. I've got bills stacked so high I use them to level my table. I don't care. He shook his head. You should. Juliette's voice dropped. I've had everything. And still, I've never had this. What, a mechanic with a rusted truck and a kid who eats cereal for dinner 3 nights a week? No, she said. A man who makes me feel alive. Victor looked at her for a long time. Then he said, if this is real, it's not just me you're taking on. I know, she said quietly. I've already made peace with that. Neither of them noticed Emmett come around the corner with a fistful of dandelions and a grin. I picked these for you, he said, handing them to Juliette. She knelt down and took them like they were roses. Thank you, Emmett. They're the best flowers I've ever gotten. Victor's throat tightened. That night, as he carried Emmett to bed and folded laundry in the dim light of their apartment, he wondered when everything had changed. When a stranger in a diner had become the only person he couldn't stop thinking about. But it wasn't until 3 days later when Juliette showed up at the garage with a bruise on her arm and panic in her voice that Victor realized just how deep he was in. I didn't know where else to go, she said, eyes wide and wild. He's back, the man from the diner, and this time, he knows who I am. Victor didn't wait. The instant he saw the bruise beneath Juliette's sleeve, his jaw clenched and he tossed his wrench onto the workbench. He didn't ask how the man found her. He didn't care. All he saw was fear on her face and the way her arm trembled when she reached for him. Get in the truck, he said, already pulling off his gloves. You're not going back there. I don't want to put you in danger, she said, voice shaking. You already did, he said. Now let me handle it. Juliette didn't argue. Victor locked up the garage and drove them back to his apartment, not caring that the dashboard lights flickered or that the brakes had started whining again. He kept one hand on the wheel and the other close to her, ready in case she needed it. When they walked through the door, Emmett looked up from the floor, where he was building a tower with mismatched blocks. His eyes lit up. Jules, he shouted, running to her. She crouched and hugged him tight, wincing slightly when he bumped her arm. Victor caught the flinch. Bathroom. Now, he said quietly. He led her to the narrow hallway and turned on the light. She sat on the closed toilet lid while he pulled out the first aid kit from beneath the sink. Gently, he rolled up her sleeve. The bruise was darker now, a blooming patch of purple and blue along her upper arm. Victor's hands stiffened, but he didn't say a word. He soaked a cloth and dabbed gently. Juliette watched him, silent for a while, then said, he was my late husband's business partner, Marcus Lang. After the funeral, he tried to take over, said I wasn't capable of handling things. When I refused to give him a seat on the board, he started pushing harder. At first, it was just threats. Then it became more. Victor looked up. Why didn't you go to the police? I did. But Marcus is careful. He never leaves proof, and his family's just as old as mine. No one wants to touch it. Victor dropped the cloth into the sink. You're staying here tonight. I'll figure something out tomorrow. You don't have to do that. I know, he said, but I'm doing it anyway. That night, Juliette slept on the pull-out couch. Victor made her tea and left her with a pillow and Emmett's favorite blanket. He didn't ask questions. He just sat in the kitchen long after the lights were off, staring at the floor and thinking. The next morning, he found a manila envelope on the counter with a single page inside. Legal jargon. A cease and desist. Marcus Lang's legal team wanted Juliette to step down from her company immediately. Victor read it twice, then walked into the living room. Juliette was awake, curled beneath the blanket, her eyes distant. He's trying to push you out, he said. She nodded. He's been waiting for the right leverage. Now he thinks he's found it. Victor sat beside her. Then we give him something else. She looked over at him. What do you mean? Let's make him think you've already moved on, that you're not alone. If he thinks I'm part of your life, he might back off. Juliette blinked. Are you suggesting we pretend to be together? No, Victor said. I'm saying let's tell him we are, and if that means crashing one of his fancy parties to make a point, then so be it. Her eyes narrowed. You'd really do that? I don't bluff. Juliette sat up slowly. There's a charity gala tonight. He'll be there. And he hates public scenes. Then that's where we're going. Later that evening, Victor stood in front of the mirror wearing the only suit he'd ever owned, a black one with slightly worn lapels and sleeves that were a hair too short. Juliette had sent someone earlier with a tie, cufflinks, and a pair of shoes that actually fit. Emmett was with the neighbor for the night, bribed with cookies and cartoons. Victor had never left him overnight before, but Juliette's eyes had been so determined, so convinced it would work, that he'd agreed. When the driver pulled up, Victor barely recognized the woman who stepped out. Juliette wore a deep navy gown with thin straps and a low back. Her hair was swept up, revealing the curve of her neck and a pair of diamond earrings she hadn't worn before. She didn't look like someone hiding from danger. She looked like she owned the world. "You clean up okay," she said with a soft smile. "You're not so bad yourself." The ride to the gala was quiet but buzzing with tension. Victor kept his eyes on her, memorizing the way her fingers toyed with the edge of her clutch. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" he asked. "I've been underestimated my entire life," she said. It's time someone sees what happens when they push too far. The ballroom was already full when they arrived. Gold chandeliers glowed overhead, and every table shimmered with crystal and candlelight. Waiters moved like shadows, silent and precise. Victor took her arm as they entered. Heads turned, conversations paused. Juliette didn't flinch. She leaned into him and whispered, "He's by the bar, black tuxedo, red cufflinks." Victor spotted him instantly. Marcus Lang had the kind of face that made people step aside without knowing why. Thin smile, cold eyes. He turned and froze when he saw them. Juliette didn't wait. She walked straight across the floor, Victor at her side. People parted for her like a tide. "Marcus," she said, tone light, "I didn't expect to see you out tonight." "Isn't there a boardroom somewhere that needs bullying?" Victor bit down a laugh. Marcus's gaze flicked between them. "I see you found company." Juliette glanced up at Victor. "Actually, we're together now. He's been helping me see what matters." Marcus's expression didn't shift, but something in his jaw twitched. "Interesting choice, isn't it?" Juliette said sweetly. "And he's wonderful with children." Victor reached out and tucked a loose curl behind her ear, slow and deliberate. "She deserves more than threats and shadows." Marcus's eyes darkened. "You should be careful who you align with, Juliette. Some reputations don't survive scandal." Juliette's smile never faded. "Then I suppose we'll just have to create a bigger one." They walked away, leaving Marcus staring after them. When they reached the terrace, Juliette exhaled. Her hands trembled slightly, and Victor caught one, steadying it. "You okay?" he asked. "I didn't think I'd be able to do that." "You were perfect." She looked up at him. "You didn't have to come tonight." "Yes, I did." "Why?" Victor leaned down, brushing his lips against hers, slow and sure. "Because I care," he whispered. "And I'm not going anywhere." Juliette's breath caught, and for the first time in weeks, she felt safe. Victor stood just inside the doorway of Juliette's penthouse, still damp from the rain outside, his jaw tight as he dialed the number she'd scribbled for her personal lawyer. He handed the phone off once it connected, and Juliette took it with a calmness Victor knew was a battle to maintain. "Request the injunction," she said into the receiver. "Immediate, full protection order, and call the board, schedule an emergency vote first thing tomorrow." "No, I don't care if it's Sunday." Victor didn't speak. He just watched her, arms crossed, his shirt clinging to him from the downpour. She looked different now, not just more powerful, but more certain. Like she'd stopped trying to survive and had started fighting back. When she hung up, she turned toward him, her eyes sharp. "He'll blink," she said. "He always blinks when he's cornered." "You cornered him the second you walked into that ballroom," Victor said. Juliette stepped closer, studying him. "You didn't hesitate, not once." "I couldn't," Victor said. "You were standing in front of someone who thought he could run you down, and you didn't flinch. That kind of courage doesn't get left alone." Juliette's expression softened, but she didn't reach for him. Not yet. "Do you know the last time someone stood beside me when it cost them something? I'm not in this for what it might cost me," he said. "I'm in because you matter." She looked like she wanted to say something else, but Emmett's laugh rang out from the guest room. The babysitter had brought him back an hour ago, and he was now deep into building a cardboard spaceship with tape and paper towel tubes. Juliette turned toward the sound and smiled. "He's going to fly it, isn't he?" "He's already packed snacks and a screwdriver," Victor said. "He's launching at bedtime." Juliette tilted her head. "You know he called me his favorite person last night." Victor's eyebrows lifted. "He did." He whispered it while I was reading to him, said I was better than cartoons. "That's the highest honor in this house." She grew quiet. "I never thought I'd want this life." Victor leaned against the wall. "Which part?" The messy, loud, cardboard spaceship part, the late-night tea, the grocery list, the off-key singing in the car. Her gaze met his. I thought I needed boardrooms and polished speeches. Turns out I needed dirt under my nails and a 6-year-old co-pilot. Victor stepped toward her. You're not scared of what comes next. I was, she admitted. But then I realized Marcus has power because I let him have it. I kept thinking I had to keep everything under control. But control doesn't build anything that lasts. People do. Victor nodded. Then let's build something. Her breath hitched as he took her hands. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything. I don't want to be the guy who just patched things up and walked away, he said. I want to be the one who stays. Juliette's hands tightened around his. You already are. The next morning, Victor stood beside her at the board meeting. The members filed in, all in pressed suits and cautious expressions. Juliette wore a dark suit dress, her chin high, and Victor stood behind her, not as an accessory but as presence. When Marcus entered, his confidence faltered just enough to be visible. He scanned the room, saw Victor, saw Juliette's steady gaze, and sat down without a word. Juliette didn't waste time. The vote today is simple, she began. You either support my continued leadership, or you choose to back someone who's repeatedly violated personal and legal boundaries. Marcus opened his mouth. I'm not finished, Juliette said, her voice cutting clean through the room. This company was built on integrity. If we forget that, we deserve to fall, but I won't fall, not quietly, not ever. The room fell silent after she spoke. One by one, hands rose. The vote was unanimous. Juliette remained CEO. Marcus stood and left without a word. After the meeting, she turned to Victor. It's over. He shook his head. No, it's just starting. That evening, she took them both to the rooftop. Her chef, who Victor hadn't even met, until now brought up a dinner spread that could have fed 10 people. Emmett ran between the lounge chairs, waving sparklers someone had lit just for him. Juliette stood beside Victor with bare feet and a glass of wine, her hair loose in the breeze. I called the broker, she said. I'm stepping back from day to day. I'm keeping the company, but I'm hiring a new operations director. I want time. Victor frowned. For what? For a life that doesn't revolve around press releases. He paused. What does that life look like? Juliette looked over at Emmett, now attempting to teach the chef a dance move that required hopping on one foot. Saturday breakfasts, spilled juice, grocery trips, a kid's science fair project with way too many wires, him. All of it. Victor couldn't speak for a moment, then he pulled something from his pocket. I was going to wait, he said, but you don't strike me as the kind of woman who likes waiting. He held out a small box. Inside was a ring not flashy but crafted with care. A rose gold band, a single stone, delicate and strong. Juliette stared at it, her hand lifting to her mouth. I don't have a fortune, Victor said, but I have a heart that's yours and a son who already thinks you hung the moon. She looked up, eyes full. Yes, she whispered. He slid the ring onto her finger as Emmett ran over, breathless. Are we getting married? He asked, eyes wide. Victor laughed. If she'll have us both. Juliette knelt and hugged him tight. That spaceship better have room for 3. Fireworks exploded above the skyline. Someone in the building below was celebrating something else entirely, but none of them noticed. They had their own celebration. And this time, no one was pretending. The ceremony was held on a quiet hilltop overlooking the river, far from chandeliers and boardrooms, far from headlines and contracts. Just wildflowers, soft wind, and the sound of Emmett's laughter echoing as he raced between the rows of white chairs, his tiny tuxedo shirt untucked and his shoes already lost in the grass. Juliette stood behind the curtain of the small tent, her hands resting gently on the edge of the linen-draped table, waiting for her cue. Her dress was simple ivory silk that moved like water when she breathed, no glitter, no fanfare. She didn't need it. Victor hadn't seen the dress. She'd insisted. What he didn't know was that she'd sewn a piece of Emmett's first drawing into the lining of the bodice, a crayon rocket ship with 3 stick figures. A boy, a man, and a woman with curly hair. Underneath it, he'd written one word in crooked letters: family. I keep thinking I should be more nervous, Juliette said, still watching the sky turn that pale gold that only came in early evening. But I feel like I've already arrived. Beside her, the woman who'd once been her art professor and later her mentor adjusted the lace on her sleeve. "You've already done the hardest part. You let someone love you. That's braver than standing up to power." Juliette smiled. "He calls me stubborn. He calls you right." Music started a soft acoustic melody Victor had once hummed absent-mindedly while fixing her broken porch light. She'd recorded it and sent it to a local guitarist without telling him. She stepped into the sun and everyone stood. Victor was waiting at the altar, Emmett by his side, holding a ring box with both hands like it was made of glass. Victor wore a charcoal vest and a navy tie, his hair freshly cut, his eyes locked on her like seeing her for the first time all over again. Juliette didn't look at the guests. She didn't need to see the rows of people, friends, employees, artists, old neighbors, even a few board members who'd once doubted her. All she saw was the man who had stood beside her when everything else was uncertain. When she reached him, Emmett whispered loudly, "Don't forget to say the I do part." Juliette grinned. "I won't." The officiant didn't ramble. They'd asked for something short, something true. Promises were exchanged not from a script but from memory. "I never thought I'd get to have something whole," Juliette said, voice low but steady. "But you and Emmett, you gave me a life that isn't just beautiful, it's honest." Victor's hand tightened around hers. "You made me believe that love doesn't have to be earned with sacrifice. That maybe, just maybe, we get to keep the good things. And you're the best thing that's ever happened to me." The guests clapped as they kissed not out of formality but because they couldn't help themselves. At the reception, instead of a dance floor covered in rose petals, they had an open field strung with lights. The tables were mismatched wood, borrowed from neighbors and friends. Every centerpiece was a different wildflower, arranged by Emmett and the local florist who owed Victor for fixing her delivery van last winter. Juliette pulled Victor into a quiet corner after the cake was cut, a lemon one with honey frosting Emmett had insisted on. "I think they're waiting for a first dance," she said. Victor glanced at the crowd where Emmett was currently attempting to teach the photographer how to moonwalk. "I don't know how to slow dance," he admitted. "Good," Juliette said and tugged him toward the grass. "Then let's make it up." They swayed under the string lights, the music soft. Her head rested against his shoulder and neither of them said anything for a while. Then Victor murmured, "Did I tell you I bought the shop?" She looked up. "You did?" "Yeah, the owner was retiring. Gave me a deal because he said I brought it back to life. Thought we could turn the back lot into an art space for local kids. You know, since we've got a resident artist in the house now." Her eyes filled. "I want to build something with you," he said. "Not just a home. A legacy." Juliette leaned in and kissed him slow, the kind of kiss that made the world quiet. Later that night, after guests had left and Emmett had fallen asleep in a pile of coats and cake crumbs, they stood alone on the balcony of their new home, a modest two-story on the edge of town, with a garden that had more weeds than flowers and a roof Victor had already started fixing. "I never thought I'd fall for someone who didn't come from my world," Juliette said, barefoot, sipping tea. Victor wrapped an arm around her waist. "You didn't." She glanced up. "I came from yours," he said simply. "You just didn't know it yet." She laughed, pulled him closer and whispered, "So what now?" He gestured toward the stars. "Now we build a life, a home, a future." And together they stood in the quiet, holding hands while the wind wrapped around them like a promise not of perfection, but of permanence. They had already been through the storm. Now they got to stay in the light, forever.